The handouts or review materials must be treated with utmost confidentiality. It shall be the responsibility of the person whose name appears therein that the handouts or review materials are not photocopied or in any way reproduced, shared, or lent to any person or disposed in any manner. Any handouts or review materials found in the possession of another person whose name does not appear therein shall be prima facie evidence of violation of RA 8293. Top-notch review materials are updated every 6 months based on the current trends and feedback. Please buy all recommended review books and other materials.
Okay, let's now move down to the stomach. The stomach is divided into several parts. We have the cardia. Okay, this is the part that receives the terminal esophagus. First region. Okay, this is important for hydrochloric acid secretion. Next is the fundus, which is the superiormost. Okay, plays a crucial role in capacitance by undergoing receptive relaxation. This is the site where the autonomic pacemaker, okay, responsible for initiating gastric motor activity is located, the so-called interstitial cells of Cajal or Cajal. Okay, its inferior extent is defined by a horizontal plane of the GE junction. Ibig sabihin, if we place here an imaginary line, medyo displace yung arrow natin, doon sa dulo ng left side ng esophagus, okay, an imaginary transverse line like that area of the stomach above that line will be the fundus. Okay, so sabi natin kanina, nagkakaroon doon ng notch, yung cardiac notch. If another imaginary line is placed, this time along the axis of the angular notch, okay, right here, ito, na-displace lang, ang tawag natin dyan ay incisura angularis. In between those two imaginary lines will be the corpus or the body. Distal to the oblique line of the incisura will be the antropyloric complex. Okay? So, fundus ito, yung nasa taas ng horizontal line. Corpus body, yung in between the two lines. Okay? So, meron tayong lesser curvature, meron tayong greater curvature. Dito sa lesser curvature, nandiyan ang angular notch. This one. Okay, and then along that axis is the imaginary line we call the incisura angularis that divides the stomach into body or corpus proximally and then the antropyloric region distally. Okay, so yung antrum from the incisura to the pylorus will form the distal 25 to 30% of the stomach. Ibig sabihin, after an anthrectomy, okay, may naiiwan pang 70 to 75% ng stomach. Yun yung proximal, fundus at saka body. Okay? So, blood supply, in-enumerate na natin kanina, sa topic ng esophagus. Ang venous drainage will follow or parallel the course, of the blood supply. And they are all tributaries of the portal vein. Okay? Ang stomach lymphatic drainage, like in the esophagus, they are named depending on their location. So we have superior gastric, suprapyloric, pancreaticosplenic, and infrapyloric. Okay? Infrapyloric, ibig sabihin nasa ilalim ng pylorus. Pancreaticosplenic, nandoon sa proximal greater curve kasi dyan dumadaan ang splenic vessels papuntang splenic hilum. Okay? Just above the pancreas. Stomach innervation, since the stomach is just a continuation of the esophagus, you will see the continuation of the vagus nerves to the stomach, Kanya lang kasi nagro-rotate ang nagro-rotate ang intra-abdominal visceral organs. So yung left branch ng esophagus nagiging anterior while yung right branch nagiging posterior. Yung sabi ni Schwartz, ang mnemonic niya dyan LARP, L-A-R-P. Left is anterior, right posterior. At nag-iiba rin siya ng pangalan, tinatawag na siyang nerves of Laterjet. So meron tayong anterior and posterior nerves of Laterjet. They are nothing but the anterior and posterior vagus, which were previously left and right. Okay? The left vagal trunk goes anterior and it gives the hepatic branch. While the right goes posterior, it gives the celiac branch and, okay, this important branch of the right vagus, the criminal nerve of Grassi that supplies the posterior portion of the fundus. Okay, question, ba't ba ito tinawag na criminal nerve, no? In an ulcer, okay, that would require surgery, okay, lalo na yung hypersecretory forms of ulcer, part of the management or definitive management is to cut the vagus. No, meron tayong tinatawag na vagotomy, no? There are several forms of vagotomy. Ba't kailangan putulin yung vagus? Kasi dumadaan sa vagus yung isa sa tatlong stimuli ng acid production. Ano yun? Yung acetylcholine. Okay, so sa ulcer definitive surgical management, nagbabagotomy. Kanya lang yung criminal nerve, dahil sa liit nito, no, at saka ang origin nito is above the diaphragm, miski magbagotomy, nami-miss ng surgeon ito. No, hindi niya to nakikita kasi sa above ng diaphragm nag-originate ito eh. So kahit putulin mo yung main trunk, intact yung criminal nerve. So after bagotomy, nagkakaroon ng recurrence ng ulcer sa posterior fundus. Pag pina-explain sa'yo, bakit ganun? Eh dahil dito, no, sa criminal nerve of Grassi. Okay? Let's go to the histology. There are several cells that may populate the stomach. Okay, so we have mucus cells from the name itself. Alam na natin yung product niya, no, mucin. And that somehow protect, no, the gastric epithelium from the effects, no, of acid. Okay, aside from that, it produces bicarbonate. Yung parietal or oxyntic cells produces hydrochloric acid and more importantly, intrinsic factor. Okay? Necessary for later on absorption of vitamin B12 at the terminal ileum. We have chief or zymogenic cells producing pepsinogen, gastric lipase, and leptin. We have enterochromaffin cells producing serotonin. We have enterochromaffin-like cells producing histamine, okay, the second stimulus for acid production. And then we have D cells producing somatostatin, no, the only inhibitor of acid production in the stomach. And then, of course, G cells, no, producing gastrin, the third stimulus. No, sabi natin, tatlo yung stimuli, no, acetylcholine, histamine, and then gastrin. Okay, a 55-year-old complains of anorexia, weight loss, and fatigue. An upper GI study demonstrates an ulcerated lesion at the incisura. Where is the incisura? Cardia, fundus, greater curvature, lesser curvature, or the gastrocolic ligament. Nasaan ba yung incisura? Nandun sa lesser curvature. Okay, diyan tayo naglalagay ng incisura angularis, no, doon sa angular notch. Okay, so control of acid secretion, no, this is the parietal cell, no, being shown to us. Okay, meron siyang luminal side, okay, at saka yung interstitial side, no, and then yung basolateral regions, ibig sabihin yung nasa gilid. Okay, tatlo yung stimuli, no, acetylcholine at saka gastrin will both stimulate the proton pump, okay, by way of calcium as its secondary messenger. Okay, while, okay, the remaining histamine will stimulate the proton pump by way of another secondary messenger, no, si cyclic AMP naman. While si somatostatin, sabi natin kanina, is the lone inhibitor, no, kaya yun negative sign. Okay, again, acting through the CAMP pathway, no, so inhibitory siya, no, doon sa cyclic AMP pathway. So instead na activates the protein kinase, it deactivates it. Okay, so if you know this, you know how to prevent, no, acid formation, no. Nowadays we have H2 antagonists at saka PPIs. Before, nung wala pa yung mga gamot na yan, the only way to prevent acid formation is to what? Cut the vagus, okay, and remove the source of gastrin. Okay, in the stomach, the G cells are concentrated in the antrum. Okay, Kaya laging may anthrectomy at saka truncal vagotomy. Okay? Kasi late naman na nung na-discover tong histamine. Okay? Galing sa enterochromaffin-like cells. Okay? So, acetylcholine, okay, dine-deprive natin ng stomach niyan through vagotomy. Yung gastrin by removing the antrum in an anthrectomy. Okay? A 50-year-old man is involved in a major motor vehicle collision and suffers multiple trauma. He is admitted to the ICU. After 2 days of hospital admission, he bleeds massively from the stomach. What is the probable cause? Pagka victim, no, of multiple trauma or severe injury, nagkakaroon ng erosive gastritis. Okay? Hindi pa yan gastric ulcer, duodenal ulcer, hiatal hernia, or even a maluriwise. No? Yung erosive gastritis, stress itself, no, may cause back diffusion of protons, no, back to the gastric wall. Bakit ba bumabalik? Kasi nababawasan ng perfusion, no, ng stomach kapag ka merong severe stress. Makikita natin sa mga protective factors ng stomach kasama yung adequate blood supply or perfusion, no, to prevent ulcer formation. Okay? So let's go to peptic ulcer disease. No? This refers to focal defects in the gastric or duodenal mucosa which extends into the submucosa or deeper. No? So requirement na kailangan yung defect umabot ng submucosa. If not, tinatawag lang nating erosion yon. No? So kung nasa mucosa lang, hindi umabot ng submucosa, we call that erosive gastritis. Okay? Ultimately, it is caused by an imbalance, o kaya merong weighing scale dito, no? An imbalance between the action of acid and mucosal defense. Okay? So yun yung equilibrium, no, between aggressors and defensive factors. So ano yung mga aggressors, no, na pwedeng mag-tip ng scale? Increased acid, increased pepsin, NSAID use, H. pylori. Ibig sabihin, tataas dyan, no? Magtitip yung scale, magkaka-ulcer. Or, pwede ring nawalan ka ng defense, like bicarbonate, blood flow, like I've mentioned, no, in multiple trauma, mucus, okay? Cell junction, apical resistance, okay? Yung mga yan, okay? Nawalan ka ng defense and repair mechanism, ulcer din ang result nun. Okay? If you look at the etiology, both for duodenal and gastric, nowadays, majority is a result of H. pylori infection. Okay? Bali, ano to, no? Yung double-bladed sword. Kasi ang H. pylori, aggressor na, it lessens pa, no, the defense mechanism of the stomach and the duodenum. Okay? So, majority, no? 90%. O even 95%, no, ng ulcer ay dahil sa H. pylori. Followed by NSAIDs, okay? And then yung mga rare causes like yun, no, Zollinger-Ellison syndrome or gastrinoma. Okay? So, manifestations, no, clinically we were taught, no, to discriminate the patient's complaint, okay? More likely if is it gastric or duodenal ulcer. Okay? So, usual location muna for gastric is at the incisura near the lesser curve. Remember that, no? That's the most common location for gastric ulcers. Okay? And gastric adenocarcinoma. Nasaan? Nasa incisura near the lesser curve. While in the duodenum, nasa first portion of the duodenum, no? Usually within the 3 centimeters of the pylorus. You have an older patient in a gastric ulcer, almost equal male is to female distribution, although for males more common in duodenal. Timing of pain is very important, no? In a gastric ulcer, the pain occurs while eating, and food actually worsens the pain. Unlike in duodenal, the pain is felt, no, about 2 to 3 hours after a meal, and food relieves pain. Okay, importante yan, no? Kasi sa etiology, okay? Duodenal ulcers kasi a result of acid hypersecretion yun. Okay, lagi, no, walang exemption. Ibig sabihin, it takes time, no, for the acid to be formed. Gagawin pa ng proton pump yun, no? So, yung food, it relieves pain, but it aggravates the ulcer pain kung gastric. Kasi sa gastric, Okay? Majority of ulcers are due to loss of defense mechanism. Okay? Kaya nga yung pain nararamdaman habang kumakain. It is less likely to awaken the patient, okay, at night kung gastric. It awakens the patient from sleep kung duodenal. Okay? Risk of malignancy is common in gastric, extremely rare for duodenal. That is an important dictum to remember. Okay? That all gastric ulcers are malignant ulcers unless proven otherwise by biopsy. Okay, may implication din pagdating sa management yan, no? That is why we perform biopsy and resective procedures for gastric rather than duodenal because of that rule. Okay? Na baka malignant yan, no? Baka adenocarcinoma yan. That is not applicable for duodenal. Okay? So usual etiology, the same, no? H. pylori, NSAID. Okay? So for gastric, it is due to decreased cytoprotection, no? Sabi ko kanina, decreased repair mechanism. Okay? Although merong types ng gastric ulcer associated with increased acid, okay? Majority are due to decreased cytoprotection. Unlike in duodenal, no? Ang rule sa duodenal, no acid, no ulcer. Okay? So the goal of management for gastric ulcer is resective. Kailangan maalis mo yun kasi hindi mo sure baka malignant ulcer yun eh. Okay? Unlike for duodenal, decreased production lang ng acid. Okay? The complications are the same, no? Bleeding being the most common. Actually may 4 no na complications yan necessitating surgery. Bleeding is the most common. Then we have perforation. Okay? We have intractability or failure of medical management. At saka yung last, gastric outlet obstruction. Okay, so how do we start the diagnosis? An upper endoscopy would be required only for those that are more than 45 years of age with symptoms, especially yung tinatawag na alarm symptoms, no? Weight loss, bleeding, recurrent vomiting, anemia, and dysphagia. Kung less than 45, no, young patients with symptoms, parang sa GERD, no, they can be started with empiric PPI or H2 antagonist. Okay? So ganun din, no? 8 to 12 weeks, no? 8 weeks for duodenal, 12 weeks kapag gastric, no? Mas matagal kasi ang healing kapag gastric ulcer. No? Sige sabihin, ilang months 'yun? 3 months, 'di ba? So sabi natin pagka more than 3 months, nandiyan pa yung wound, non-healing wound 'yun. Okay, kaya 12 weeks, no, yung observation, no, ng pagbibigay ng medical management. Biopsy for all gastric ulcers and areas of gastritis, okay, to rule out carcinoma and H. pylori infection. Take note, no, ano yung purpose ng biopsy? Of course, to rule out carcinoma, but not only that, no, through biopsy, one can document H. pylori infection. Okay? But before a biopsy, there are other ways, no, of diagnosing H. pylori. Okay? Serology is the test of choice when endoscopy is not indicated, like yung mga young patients. Okay? If endoscopy is already required, okay, kung kailangan mo na mag-endoscopy, rapid urease test will be the simplest method in diagnosing H. pylori. Okay? What are the other options? A histologic test to ascertain presence of H. pylori and then culture, no? Doon sa hindi gumagaling kasi 'di ba ang treatment ng H. pylori combination ng antibiotics at saka PPI and bismuth, no? Yung mga triple and quadruple regimens. Pag hindi yan gumagaling doon, kailangan mo ng culture. Okay? How will you know that the H. pylori has been eradicated? We need another tool or diagnostic method, and that is through urea breath test. Okay, so urea breath test is the preferred test for confirming, okay, absence rather than presence of the H. pylori. Okay, so do not be confused, no? May dalawang urea dyan, no? Rapid urease at saka urea breath test. Okay, so i-alphabetize mo lang, no, para hindi ka ma-confuse sa timing. yung rapid urease R, nauuna yun sa iyo eh. Nauuna yung, 'di ba? Yung eradication. Okay? So simplest method when endoscopy is necessary, you need this pre-eradication. Post-eradication, you will need urea breath test. Kasi ito magsasabi sa yung wala ng H. pylori. Okay, yung urea breath test. Yung rapid urease, sasabihin niya sa iyo, merong H. pylori. Okay, during your endoscopy. Okay? A 45-year-old complains of burning epigastric pain that wakes him up at night. The pain is relieved by eating or using over-the-counter antacids and H2 blockers. Diagnosis is best confirmed by which of the following? Okay, best confirmed by which of the following? A combination of endoscopy and biopsy. Again, kahit duodenal ulcer, binabiopsy not for malignancy documentation purposes, but for what? For H. pylori documentation. Okay? So, complications, we have, again, bleeding being the most common, followed by perforation. We have gastric outlet obstruction, and then intractability. Okay, so bleeding may present with melena, okay, or yung black or tarry stool, okay, kasi nako-convert yung hemoglobin to acid hematine, no? Kulay itim yon, okay, kung hindi naman brisk yung bleeding. Or pwedeng hematemesis, okay, with or without shock, no? Fresh blood. Diagnosed by simple insertion of an NGT, okay, and then of course endoscopy. Kasi importanteng malaman minsan, no, kung yung bleeding upper GI ba o lower GI by origin. Yung term na upper GI, ibig sabihin nun, we mean the area above the ligament of Treitz. Pag sinabi mong above ligament of Treitz, kasama si esophagus, stomach, duodenum dun. Okay? Pag sinabi mong lower GI, as a rule, ito yung segment ng GI tract distal sa ligament of Treitz. Okay, so paano nakatulong yung NGT? Okay, so ano ba yung classic teaching? Pag nagkabit ka ng NGT, tapos yung blood may kasamang bile, ang assumption, ang source, lower GI. Pagka walang bile, ang assumption, purely upper GI. Okay? Of course, hindi na applicable ngayon yun. Kaya nga, di ba, may endoscopy na tayo, no? May endoscope na tayo. Pero simple rule yun, na ginagamit, no, even in the wards, no, just by inserting an NGT, you would know, for example, no, hindi hematemesis, gawin nating lower GI, yung pasyente naghe-hematokysha, okay, pwede kasing ang hematokysha galing ng upper GI source, no, halimbawa massive gastric ulcer bleeding, pwedeng mag-manifest yun as hematokysha. By placing an NGT, tapos ang lumabas sa NGT mo blood lang, okay, somehow you have an idea, upper GI yung source. Pero kung aside from blood, may bile, okay, yung differentials mo mapupunta sa lower GI segments like the colon, okay, or the small intestine. Kasi mayroong bleeding Meckel's diverticulum, di ba, na pwede ring mag-present as hematokysha, okay? Going back, no? So kung ang bleeding ay hindi naman hindi umabot, no, sa threshold ng surgical indication, it can be treated simply with placing the patient in PO, giving your PPIs or H2 antagonist, and then minimally invasive techniques like endoscopic, okay, injection ng epinephrine or electrocoagulation, no, or cauterization ng ulcer bed. Okay. Ano yung indications ngayon? There is persistent bleeding or there is rebleeding. Ibig sabihin, there is failure of endoscopic management. When there is significant hemorrhage defined as more than 4 units, okay, of blood necessary to be transfused in 24 hours. In elderly patients with comorbidities, importante ito. Bakit? Kasi karamihan ng may ulcer complication nasa group na ito. Elderly patients with comorbidities. Ulcers located at the posterior duodenal bulb and ulcers located at the gastric lesser curve. Why? Kasi may proximity, no, sa important blood vessel. Sa likod ng duodenum, nandun yung gastroduodenal artery. Sa lesser curve, nandun yung celiac trunk at saka abdominal aorta. No? Imagine the acid eroding through the gastroduodenal artery at saka aorta or celiac trunk. So, dapat mas maaga ang threshold mo to perform surgery if the location of the ulcer is right there. Another is high risk of rebleeding based on endoscopic findings. Okay, sa endoscopy, binibigyan ng grade 'yon ng gastroenterologist. Depende kung ano ba karakter ng bleeding at saka ng ulcer. Okay, so sabi dito, okay, active pulsatile or non-pulsatile bleeding but the vessel is visible at the ulcer crater. And that is what? Tantamount to a grade 1A, grade 1B, at saka grade 2A sa Forest classification. So, kung ang findings ng endoscopy Forest grade 1A, 1B, and 2A, high rebleeding risk, indication yun for surgical intervention. Okay, next complication is perforation. Okay, this is fairly easy to diagnose clinically because these are the patients that presents to the ER with an acute, okay, or surgical abdomen where there is marked abdominal guarding and rebound tenderness. Okay, so the initial contamination is chemical, then later on becoming bacterial, okay, explaining the sepsis. Okay, so the only additional workup necessary is an upright chest x-ray. Take note, upright chest x-ray, not an abdominal x-ray, to identify, okay, in 80% of population, pneumoperitoneum or air escaping from the perforation. Okay, as seen in this, okay, radiograph, that lucency in between the right hemidiaphragm and the liver. Normally, there shouldn't be any lucency in that area. While lucency on the left can be normal, okay, gastric bubble or Magen-Blase. Okay, so 80% will reveal this finding. Okay, lesson, 20% will not, meaning 20% of patients with perforation will not show pneumoperitoneum. This happens when the perforation is located in the posterior stomach where the air escapes into the lesser sac, or the posterior duodenum where the air escapes into the retroperitoneum. And so therefore, okay, we don't make a decision of surgery based on the result of the upright chest x-ray. We base it on history and physical examination. So if you have a history of chronic epigastric pain and then suddenly this patient consults you with a board-like rigid abdomen, okay, that is to be followed by an exploratory laparotomy regardless of the chest x-ray findings. Okay, just like in the esophagus, there is a non-operative option, confined to those with sealed perforations. Okay, majority will have to pass through an exploration. Okay, so this is how we prepare a patient prior to perforation or prior to laparotomy rather. Place the patient on NPO, decompress the gut with NGT, okay, replace lost fluids and electrolytes with IVF, and then start antibiotics, give PPIs, and then analgesics. For gastric outlet obstruction, the third complication, the patient presents with non-bilous vomiting that leads to profound hypokalemic, hypochloremic, metabolic alkalosis. Okay, patient manifests with epigastric pain and weight loss. Okay, there is aversion to food intake, because of the obstruction. Okay, so compared to the previous two complications, this complication would require an elective, okay, intervention, unlike bleeding and perforation that most likely would require an urgent approach. Okay, so we first correct this fluid and electrolyte disturbance prior to the surgery. A 63-year-old woman is admitted to the hospital with severe abdominal pain of 3-hour duration. PE reveals board-like rigidity, guarding, and rebound tenderness. BP is 90/50, pulse is 110, respiratory rate is 30. After history and PE and initiation of fluid resuscitation, what diagnostic study should be performed? So this is a patient with a perforated ulcer, B upright chest x-ray. And then medical treatment, okay, inhibition of acid secretion with PPIs or H2 antagonists, okay, advise the patient to stop smoking, avoid alcohol, okay, stop NSAID, and eradicate H. pylori if present. Okay, first line treatment is PPI triple therapy, combination of PPI, amoxicillin, and clarithromycin. The gold standard is called the quadruple therapy, wherein we give PPI, bismuth, amoxicillin, and clarithromycin for a period of 10 to 14 days. And then we repeat the endoscopy at 6 to 8 weeks. Okay? And we perform urea breath test. Again, if I may repeat, prior to eradication, the test to request is a rapid urease test. And then post-eradication, it's a urea breath test. Okay? So that confirms cure. Urea breath test or eradication. So alphabetize mo, no, para hindi ka ma-confuse. R comes before U. So rapid urease test first and then urea breath test later. A 30-year-old executive learns that he has a duodenal ulcer. His gastro prescribes and outlines medical therapy. The patient worries that if medical therapy fails, he may need surgery. Which of the following is the best indication for elective surgical therapy for duodenal ulcer disease? Elective surgical therapy. C. Pyloric outlet obstruction due to scar formation from an ulcer. In this table, we are being shown, okay, the site of the ulcer can be either duodenal or gastric, and then the 4 complications on one side, no? Bleeding, perforation, obstruction, and then intractability or non-healing or failure of medical management. And you see, okay, from this 2x4 table, okay, a lot of surgical options to choose from, okay, and they are presented, take note, in descending order of preference. Okay, meaning number 1 is the most preferred procedure, and then the last on the list is the least preferred. Okay, so for gastric ulcer, for example, that is bleeding, okay, the preferred treatment currently is to perform oversewing with biopsy. Okay, and then compare that with a duodenal bleeding ulcer. Okay, we perform simple oversewing without the need for biopsy because of the dictum we discussed a while ago, no? That for gastric, it is a malignant ulcer unless proven otherwise. So you will notice in this table, okay, the reservation of the resective procedures like gastrectomy, antrectomy, vagotomy as last on the list, okay, because of or since the advent of effective PPIs and antibiotics against H. pylori, okay, we seldom perform ulcer definitive operations nowadays because of how effective are PPIs and antibiotics in eradicating H. pylori. Okay, before the advent of these two, okay, the definitive treatment for an ulcer almost always is a resective procedure. When we say distal gastrectomy, we remove the antrum, okay, the site of gastrin. When we say A, antrectomy, we remove specifically the antrum where gastrin or G cells are located. And that must be combined with V, vagotomy, to deprive the stomach or the parietal cells of acetylcholine. The remaining stimulus now only becomes histamine, and that can easily be blocked by drugs, no? Our H2 blockers. Okay, so that is the reason we combine, okay, vagotomy with antrectomy. Okay, so if you review the algorithm, no, for all complications, no, bleeding, perforation, okay, obstruction, okay, the most important determinant of the option to select is the physiologic status of the patient at the time of consult, not the type of ulcer, but the physiologic status, meaning is this patient likely to die or not. Okay, so if this patient is likely to die, then we perform a temporizing procedure, meaning a non-definitive procedure, a non-resective procedure. But if this patient is a lower risk patient, then by all means, no, treat the ulcer definitively. But mind you, most patients with these complications belong to the high risk population. Hence, okay, the seldom use of resective procedures. Okay, so remember that as your guiding principle when you review the slides. Okay, so let's go up to bleeding peptic ulcer first. Okay, the first question you should answer is this patient with bleeding unstable or a high operative risk? If the patient is a yes and the bleeding is coming from the duodenum, you can see that simple oversewing is the recommendation. Just suture the bleeding duodenal ulcer. If it is coming from the gastric or the stomach, combine biopsy with oversewing. Now you go to the other side. If this patient is a low risk patient, okay, simple oversewing will not suffice. No, if the bleeding is coming from the duodenum, it must be combined with an ulcer definitive procedure. No, aside from oversewing, you need to add TV/D or truncal vagotomy/drainage. Okay? If the bleeding is coming from the stomach, you need to know anong type ng gastric ulcer ito. No, we have type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, type 5. Okay? Most of them would require a resective procedure. Again, no, this is only true for low risk patients. Okay? Distal gastrectomy. You don't perform a gastrectomy if the patient is a high risk patient. No, you can do away with the ulcer, but you have a dead patient in the operating table. Okay, that's the end story. So it's very important to classify whether this patient is low risk or high risk at the time of diagnosis. Okay, so these are the different types of gastric ulcers. No, the most common is a type 1. Okay, and where is it located? At the lesser curvature near the incisura angularis. This is also the most common site for gastric adenocarcinoma. Take note of types 2 and 3, no, inside the rectangular box, no, because these are the only types of gastric ulcers associated with acid hypersecretion. Okay? And so therefore, techniques to lessen acid production are done here, like antrectomy and a vagotomy. You don't need to cut the vagus in a type 1, the most common, okay, because this is not associated with increased acid production. Okay, and then we have a type 4 when the ulcer is high up in the stomach near the esophageal termination, and we have a type 5 regardless of the location, so long as it is NSAID induced. Okay, for perforation, same story. Okay, you need to know the physiologic status first. If this patient is a high-risk patient, meaning there is high likelihood the patient will die, okay, and the perforation is located in the duodenum, simply patch the perforation with an omentum. That's it. If the perforation is located in the stomach, combine biopsy with omental patching. Okay, omental patching sometimes is called Graham's procedure. On the other side, if the perforation happens in a good risk patient or a good surgical candidate, simple patching will not suffice. You will need to add, okay, highly selective vagotomy or truncal vagotomy/drainage if the perforation is at the duodenum, or a resective procedure like gastrectomy if that is located in the stomach. Okay? So this is how Graham's procedure or mental patching is done. The margins of the perforation is debrided. Okay, only of sutures are placed, individually tied, and then buttressed with a healthy omentum for protection. Okay? Now, if a good surgical candidate, okay, for an ulcer definitive procedure exists, okay, an antrectomy almost always is part of the procedure. Why remove the antrum? Again, because that's where the G cells are located. So now imagine a stomach without an antrum. So you will have the proximal fundus and body, and then distally the first portion of the duodenum. So there is a gap that needs to be bridged. Okay? Now, if you anastomose the remaining proximal stomach to the first portion of the duodenum, you're doing a gastroduodenostomy anastomosis, and that is called a Billroth 1 reconstruction. Okay? If the first portion of the duodenum is sutured close as a stump, and instead, a loop of jejunum is used to re-establish continuity of the GI tract via a gastrojejunostomy anastomosis. One is doing a Billroth 2 reconstruction. Okay? So a Billroth 1 is a gastric and duodenal anastomosis, while a Billroth 2 is a gastric and jejunal anastomosis. Okay. Between the two, Billroth 1 is more physiologic, no? Because it's the duodenum that usually catches whatever is inside the stomach. Okay? But there are times, okay, you need to perform a Billroth 2 like in patients with chronic ulcers wherein the duodenal mucosa has been transformed into a scar. So it's not a good, okay, conduit or a good tissue to hold sutures. Okay, so it is converted into a blind stump, and then a loop of jejunum is anastomosed as the new, okay, continuation of the stomach. Okay? So although Billroth 1 is more physiologic, there are conditions wherein it's not recommended. Okay? In patients with chronic ulcer or those with duodenal cicatrix. Okay, truncal vagotomy as compared to a highly selective vagotomy or parietal cell vagotomy. No? Truncal vagotomy, from the term itself, it's the main trunk of the vagus we cut. And imagine if you cut the main trunk of the vagus, you denervate the whole distal portions of the nerve. Okay, that includes the whole stomach, and that results to gastroparesis or gastric atony, manifesting as delayed gastric emptying post-operatively. Okay? Gastroparesis, delayed gastric emptying, or gastroparesis or gastric atony are all complications of a truncal vagotomy. And to relieve that, okay, once a truncal vagotomy is done, it is always coupled with a drainage procedure. Okay, the pyloric channel must be made wider such that whatever it is inside the stomach, it goes to the distal portions of the GI tract. Okay, without staying there for long since the vagus has been cut at the main trunk. Okay, so there are many ways on how to enlarge the pyloric channel. No, you're changing the shape of the pylorus, hence you have different pyloroplasties. Okay, so Heineke Mikulix, you have Fini and Jabulé. No, never mind the names. Okay, but take note, they are all pyloroplasties. One performs a pyloroplasty or a drainage procedure only when a truncal vagotomy is done. Now, if the form of vagotomy performed is a highly selective one, no, in a highly selective vagotomy, take note of the picture, only those nerves that supplies the corpus or the body are sacrificed. They are transected. Okay, you are preserving the main trunk down to its termination, the crow's foot, such that after an HSV, the stomach retains its innervation. Okay, you have only sacrificed those branches of the vagus that supplies the body or the corpus where the parietal cells are located. Okay, the cells that produce HCl. Hence, it's called highly selective or parietal cell vagotomy. The main advantage of this one is that you don't need to incorporate a drainage procedure if the form of vagotomy is an HSV. Okay? There's no gastroparesis, there's no gastric atony, there's no delayed gastric emptying in an HSV. A healthy 75-year-old bleeds from a duodenal ulcer. Medical management and endoscopic measures fail to stop the bleeding. What is the next step in the management? Healthy 75-year-old, medical management and endoscopy failed. Okay? So, oversewing of the bleeding point, vagotomy and pyloroplasty. Okay, you need to add vagotomy and pyloroplasty as definitive procedures because of this statement, no, that medical and endoscopic measures already failed to stop the bleeding. Okay? Kung wala yung statement na yon, the answer changes to letter C. Simple oversewing will suffice, and then post-operatively give this patient PPIs, eradicate the H. pylori, and that's it. Okay? So, since this patient already tried that and it failed, okay, it is telling you this patient needs a definitive anti-ulcer procedure. A 44-year-old was admitted to the hospital with one-day history of hematemesis caused by recurrent duodenal ulcer. He has shown considerable improvement following operative treatment by truncal vagotomy and pyloroplasty 10 years prior, which is true of truncal vagotomy. Perform exclusively via the thorax, no? Perform in the neck, huwag naman, okay? If complete, it will result in increased acid secretion. Mali. It requires gastric drainage procedure. Yes, that is the answer. A 42-year-old has refractory chronic duodenal ulcer disease. His physician has suggested several options. The patient has chosen parietal vagotomy instead of truncal vagotomy and anerectomy because HSV, letter D, the complication rate is lower. 3 months after recovery from an operation to treat peptic ulcer disease, a patient complains that she has difficulty eating a large meal. A technetium-labeled chicken scintigraphy test confirms a marked delay in gastric emptying. A delay in gastric emptying may be due to which of the following? Letter D, a previous vagotomy. A 68-year-old woman has been diagnosed with a benign ulcer on the greater curve of the stomach. After 3 months of medical therapy, she continues to have, guaiac-positive stool, anemia, abdominal pain, failure of the ulcer to heal. Biopsies have not identified a malignancy. The next step in management is which of the following? So this is an intractable ulcer, or there is already failure of medical management, and the location of the ulcer is where? At the stomach. What is the dictum for the stomach? Gastric ulcers are malignant ulcers unless proven otherwise by biopsy. Unfortunately, in this case, the biopsy turned out or wasn't able to rule out malignancy, and so the dictum remains. So how do you treat a malignant gastric ulcer? Okay, treatment best is the surgical intervention including partial gastric resection, meaning distal gastrectomy. Why not a total? Because the most common location of a malignant gastric ulcer is located distal, exactly at the incisura, or at the lesser curve. So there's no need to include the proximal stomach. Okay, we only perform total gastrectomy in cases wherein the malignancy is at the proximal region, like a fundus primary or a cardiac primary, or when the whole stomach is involved, like in Linitis. Okay, so here is a list of problems we encounter post-gastrectomy. Okay, so from dumping syndrome down to weight loss, anemia, bone disease. So I hope you can explain why there is anemia after a gastrectomy. Okay, so partly because of the loss of the intrinsic factor. Okay, you should be able to explain why there is increased formation of gallstones, or because of the vagotomy. Okay, vagotomy also denervates the gallbladder, and that makes or puts the gallbladder at a stasis condition. So the bile now becomes more lithogenic or prone to form stone. So first, dumping syndrome. There are two types, early versus late. Okay, this is due to destruction of the pyloric sphincter, causing abrupt delivery of hyperosmolar load to the small intestine. Okay, so for early dumping, 15 to 30 minutes postprandially, there is a shock-like manifestation, due to peripheral and splanchnic vasodilation. Imagine all the blood migrating to the gut because of a hyperosmolar load, suddenly delivered because of the absence of the pylorus. Okay, so it manifests like shock. There is sweating in the patient, there is tachycardia, and it can be relieved by saline infusion or putting the patient on a recumbent or Trendelenburg position, and then followed by explosive diarrhea. The hyperosmolar solution intraluminally attracts water, and that explains the diarrhea that follows. Now, for late dumping happening 2 to 3 hours after eating, that is due to hyperinsulinemia, with reactive hypoglycemia. And so the management is directed toward those, okay, pathophysiologic mechanisms. Okay, so treatment-wise, we begin with octreotide for early dumping. No? Octreotide is a known splanchnic vasoconstrictor, while alpha-glucosidase inhibitors for late dumping. No? Very seldom, dumping syndrome needs to be treated surgically. Another is bile or alkaline reflux gastritis. Okay, take note, no? Most commonly associated or follows a Billroth 2 gastrojejunostomy. And it requires operation most often than other post-gastrectomy syndromes. And why is that? Okay, this patient suffers from constant epigastric pain, nausea, and bilous emesis. And the vomiting does not relieve the pain and is not associated with meals. Okay, why is there severe pain? Because bile refluxes into the stomach and bile acids are corrosive to the gastric epithelium. Okay, so endoscopy, one sees a severely inflamed gastric mucosa. Okay, so management begins with non-operative options like frequent meals, giving antacids, or bile acid sequestrants like cholestyramine or cholestipol. Okay, and then surgery is intended to divert the bile so that it will not reflux into the stomach. And how is it done? One is creating an enteroenterostomy as you see in the picture. Okay, after constructing a loop gastrojejunostomy, okay, a common anastomosis is placed between these two limbs, no? The proximal and distal, such that bile coming from here doesn't have to ascend, okay, and re-enter the stomach. It is bypassed or diverted to the distal limb of this loop jejunostomy. Okay, if the form of gastrojejunostomy previously was done via a Roux-en-Y fashion, no, a Roux-en-Y reconstruction, bile coming from this proximal limb, again, will no longer have to ascend and re-enter the stomach causing gastritis, but rather flow towards the more distal limb of the jejunum. So that is a long limb Roux-en-Y gastrojejunostomy to divert bile, okay, and thus prevent this complication of bile or alkaline reflux gastritis. Another complication is Roux stasis syndrome. Okay, take note that this is a functional obstruction. No? There is no anatomic cause to the stasis. The problem here is that the movement of the Roux limb, okay, this is the Roux limb right here. This one, okay, the one that is attached to the stomach. Instead of the peristalsis going away from the stomach, okay, to deliver the food or the gastric contents to the more distal parts of the GI tract, the propulsive activity moves toward, okay, or back to the stomach, explaining the functional obstruction. Okay, but since this obstruction is functional, okay, there is not much threat to strangulation. Okay, majority of its management is non-operative, no, maximizing promotility agents use, like ano ba itong mga promotility agents we do give? We have the peridone, we have metoclopramide, you can give erythromycin, unknown motilin agonist. Okay, so there are drugs that can be given to this patient, no, to correct that misdirected peristalsis. No? Instead of going toward the stomach, you want it to move away from the stomach like normally happening, okay, or aborally, going to the ileocecal valve. For the loop syndromes, we have afferent and efferent. Okay, so they are called as such because of the specific part of the loop they are affecting. No, afferent more proximal, efferent the distal limb. Okay, regardless, both of these loop syndromes are mechanical by nature. It could be due to adhesion, simple twisting of the bowel. There could be internal herniation. Okay, knowing that both of these are anatomic by nature, they almost always require surgery for correction. Otherwise, it could lead to what? Obstruction, okay, and then increased pressure leads to ischemia of the gut, and so it should be surgically corrected. Okay, let's go to Zollinger-Ellison syndrome or gastrinoma. This is a condition, okay, that is responsible for uncontrolled secretion of gastrin. Take note, by a pancreatic or a duodenal neuroendocrine tumor. So this is a common mistake, no? Ascribing gastrinoma as a tumor of the stomach. It is not, no? It is usually a tumor of the pancreatic head or the duodenum. Okay, 80% sporadic, 20% seen as member or part of multiple endocrine neoplasia type 1. And in patients with MEN1, it is gastrinoma being the most common pancreatic tumor. 50% are malignant with metastasis at the time of diagnosis. So how do they present? Typically severe ulcer. This is a patient with epigastric pain, reflux, diarrhea, and more than 90% will have peptic ulcer, especially on atypical areas. That will make you suspect. Okay, when you say typical, we mean stomach and the duodenum. Okay, but if you have a patient with jejunal ulcer, for example, okay, one should suspect possibility of Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. Diagnosis begins with establishing elevated fasting serum gastrin and basal acid output. Okay, if these two, okay, turns out equivocal, okay, that's the time we request for secretin stimulation test. Okay, and then gastrin is measured. If gastrin values are more than 200 picograms per ml after IV secretin, then it confirms the diagnosis. Now, before treatment, it is a must to rule out other components of MEN1, like hyperparathyroidism, because you need to correct the levels of serum calcium, PTH. Otherwise, you might have a dead patient, intraoperatively because of hypercalcemic crisis. So you need to rule that one out. Okay, rule out the presence of MEN1. And now, ideally, if one has an octreotide scan or a somatostatin receptor scan, okay, it must be requested pre-op so that you are guided intra-op where to explore or where the gastrinoma is located. If there is no octreotide scan, then the surgeon is forced to explore this area, the Pasaros triangle or the gastrinoma triangle, because here is where most gastrinomas are located. The triangle is bounded by, as you can see from the picture, the cystic duct common hepatic duct junction above, the second and third portion of the duodenum below, and the neck of the pancreas as the apex of the triangle. Okay? So, thorough exploration and then resection for sporadic cases, while for familial, those part of MEN1, they are rarely cured by surgery, but still warrants debulking to ameliorate the symptoms, because the symptoms are due to the overabundance of gastrin. So by debulking the tumor, you can somehow ameliorate, okay, the symptoms manifested by these patients due to biochemical excess of gastrin. So for malignant neoplasms of the stomach, as we can see, adenocarcinoma is the most common because of its lining being columnar. Then we have lymphoma and gastrointestinal tumor, and then the rare primary malignancies. Okay, so the risk factors for gastric adenocarcinoma, here are the most important. Okay, so number 1, family history. Okay, atrophic gastritis and Helicobacter pylori infection. So those are the 3 most common, okay, risk factors we encounter in a patient with gastric cancer. And so pathologically, H. pylori and autoimmune gastritis are the most common etiologic lesions, that create an environment for gastric inflammation to develop. Okay, so dysplasia, and then transforming to an adenoma, and then later on carcinoma. Okay, so we have 2 histological types, intestinal and the diffuse type, or the so-called linitis. Okay, so intestinal type tends to be well delineated or differentiated and associated with slow growth. As compared, in diffuse type or yung linitis, they are composed of cells that grows diffusely, meaning the entire stomach can be involved. Okay, they are the ones, okay, associated with a poorer prognosis. Okay, as to location, they start at the cardia for the diffuse type, while intestinal, they are often limited to the distal stomach. Now, this is where the most common gastric cancers are located, as we've discussed, at the incisura or near the lesser curve. Okay, So patients with this condition presents with weight loss, anorexia, and early satiety. Some would have abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, and bloating, upper GI bleeding, dysphagia, okay, paraneoplastic syndromes like Trousseau syndrome or superficial migratory thrombophlebitis, as well as acanthosis nigricans. Then by PE, signs of advanced disease or metastatic condition, we have Trocher sign. No? Trocher sign is a palpable left supraclavicular lymph node. Okay, the lymph node is called Virchow's node. No? The sign is called Trocher sign. A positive lymph adenopathy, okay, axillary lymph adenopathy in iris node. It can cause a drop metastasis to the ovary, okay, in a Krukenberg tumor. It may involve the periumbilical lymphatics in Sister Mary Joseph's nodule, or we can appreciate by a rectal examination a drop metastasis to the pelvic cul-de-sac we call Bloomer shelf. So any of these connotes a metastatic condition or a stage 4 gastric cancer disease. So just like in the esophagus, there are a combination of tools that one can use to arrive at a preoperative TNNM staging. Okay? So in summary, a biopsy via endoscopy, CT scan for assessing the extent, okay, ruling out possible liver metastasis or carcinomatosis, the accurate T stage by way of an ultrasound, because the ultrasound can directly show, the different layers of the wall, okay, so you know whether you're dealing with a T1, a T2, T3, or a T4 lesion. And then laparoscopy, okay, diagnostic laparoscopy for peritoneal fluid sampling for those without obvious carcinomatosis. And then PET scan especially for those with poorly differentiated tumors, okay, to rule out possible M1 condition or metastatic condition. The term early gastric adenocarcinoma connotes a tumor that is limited to the mucosa and the submucosa, regardless of the status of the lymphatic nodes or the lymph nodes, okay, and they can be treated by EMR or ESR, endoscopic mucosal or submucosal resection. No? Although this is rare, okay, to most of the world, they are common in Japan, where they conduct screening, for gastric cancer, because this malignancy is common to their population. So this is done for tumors less than 2 centimeters by size, and again limited to the superficial layers. For most, okay, the only curative treatment and also offers the best palliation similar to the esophagus is surgery, okay, and the goal remains to perform an R0 resection, okay. For adenocarcinoma, this is the threshold, for negative margins, at least a 5 centimeter proximal and distal negative margins, together with the lymph nodes, okay, associated with the stomach, okay, removed en bloc or in one specimen. Okay, the term radical subtotal gastrectomy connotes removal of the distal 75% of the stomach, okay, together with the pylorus and 2 cm of the proximal duodenum, the greater and lesser omentum, as well as its associated lymph nodes. And so this will leave a greater gap as compared to the Billroth 1 and Billroth 2 operations discussed for ulcers. Okay, because when one removes the antrum, that only represents about 30%, of the stomach, okay, or 15 to 30%. If one removes 75% of the stomach, that leaves only the fundus and a little bit of the cardia behind. Okay, so the reconstruction here almost always is a Billroth 2 gastrojejunostomy or a Roux-en-Y gastrojejunostomy. It's highly impossible to perform a Billroth 1 here because of the wide gap, left behind. Radical total gastrectomy connotes the removal of the entire stomach. Okay, and this is done for lesions in the mid-body, okay, or proximal stomach, for those with linitis, okay, or for patients with Menetrier's disease, gastric remnant carcinoma, kasi yun na lang yung naiwan, okay, or those with multiple diffuse gastric polyps. Okay, so for the extent of lymph node dissection, a while ago when we were discussing GE junction malignancies, we've mentioned the term D2 lymphadenectomy. So, a D0 means a gastrectomy with incomplete resection of N1 station nodes. No? And N1 nodes are the perigastric nodes. No? As to level, they are levels 1 to 6. These are the nodes very near the stomach. Hence, they are called perigastric. Okay, and they are distributed along the greater and the lesser curvatures of the stomach. The term D1 connotes removal of N1 station nodes, no, completely. So 1 to 6 plus the stomach. When we say D2, that includes N2 stations, no, and N2, aside from levels 1 to 6, we include levels 7 to 14. And that is the recommended extent of lymph node dissection in a gastric malignancy. No? We are not advised to perform D3, D4 because they don't add to the survival, but they add to the morbidity or complications. Okay? The minimum acceptable is a D1. No? In fact, in Western countries like the US, now this is their standard lymph node removal extent. Okay? But comparing D1 versus D2, D2 is associated with a better overall survival than D1. Okay? So the different lymph node stations, just remember for D1, that's levels 1 to 6. For D2, that's 1 to 14. A 60-year-old man has been having vague symptoms of upper abdominal discomfort, early satiety, and fatigue. He is referred to a gastroenterologist who performs an upper endoscopy. Although a discrete mass is not visualized, the stomach looks abnormal and it does not distend easily with insufflation. A biopsy shows signet ring cells. Which of the following is true? Okay, the answer here, okay, so the important clues given here are as follows. No? You have a non-distensible stomach and a biopsy revealing signet ring cells. No? Meaning signet ring cells are not normal cells seen in the stomach. Okay, we have mucus, oxyntic cells, we have chip cells, we have argentapin cells, but no signet ring cells. And this signifies a poorly differentiated or an undifferentiated malignancy. Okay, that should lead you to answer letter C. Leather bottle stomach or linitis plastica is a term used to describe a non-distensible stomach infiltrated by cancer. So if this is the histology you see, no, in the pre-op endoscopy with biopsy, okay, it is already telling you you can't perform the surgery by doing a radical subtotal distal gastrectomy because this involves the stomach diffusely. Okay, so one needs to remove the entire stomach, okay, to end up with an R0 intention. Okay, so this is an example, no? 51-year-old male suffering from upper GI bleeding. You have a biopsy of poorly differentiated malignancy, and by stage, it is stage 3B, meaning non-metastatic. Okay, so imagine if one removes the T, which is the stomach, and the N, which are the nodes, okay, you end up with a patient with no tumor or R0. Okay, so the intention here is curative. And so here is the specimen now. No? Here is the entire stomach. Okay, the arrow points to the area of the incisura near the lesser curve. And then internally, this is the malignant ulcer. Okay, so that ulcer turns out to be adenocarcinoma diffusely infiltrating the whole stomach. Okay, or the so-called linitis. When you turn the specimen posteriorly, you see, aside from the stomach, we've removed the distal pancreas and the spleen, okay, because they are directly involved by the tumor infiltration. And the omentum you see here contains D1 and D2 nodes, or N1 and N2 nodes, okay. So imagine now a GI tract without all of this. Okay, so if you remove the entire stomach, you only have in the patient the esophagus and the duodenum left behind. And you cannot reanastomose these two because the duodenum is fixed. So the only way to re-establish continuity of the GI tract is to get a segment of jejunum and anastomose it to the esophagus. Why the jejunum? Because the jejunum is mobile. It can readily be brought up into the distal esophagus for anastomosis. Okay, so the red arrow points to the distal esophagus, okay, just below the esophageal hiatus, and then the bed, no, right after resecting the distal pancreas, you see the portal vein behind. P connotes the pancreatic head and the duodenal segments. Okay, and then a portion of the jejunum has been cut. Okay, this is the proximal and that is the distal end. Okay, the distal end is transformed into a pouch, no? The so-called J pouch. A common anastomosis between the two limbs increases its reservoir, okay, capability, and then the J pouch is anastomosed to the esophagus. So you have now esophagojejunostomy anastomosis via a Roux-en-Y, okay, reconstruction. And those anastomotic lines are tested for leak, okay, post-operatively, such that one can resume now, okay, eating. Okay, so you will have to look at the drains like this, the JP drains, whether this blue tinge, okay, water or your methylene blue dye will exit through the drains. If there is none, the assumption is there is no leak. No, ideally you should request for a water soluble or a gastrographin swallow, and there shouldn't be any contrast extravasation at the suture lines. Okay, so another malignancy is gastric lymphoma, and being extranodal, okay, the histology is again, okay, non-Hodgkin's of B cell type. The risk factors are the same, no? Chronic gastritis, H. pylori infection, okay, some would have gene mutation, okay, an immunosuppressive state, okay, or HIV infection can all increase the risk of gastric lymphoma. It could be primary, wherein there's no other site with lymphoma but the stomach. Could be secondary, no? It is indicate that involves the stomach by diffuse lymphoma elsewhere, or tertiary, connoting recurrence within the stomach after the treatment of the lymphoma of the peripheral basin. Okay, by behavior, one encounters a low-grade or a high-grade lymphoma, no, from the names themselves, you know which one is indolent and which one is aggressive. Okay, then pathophysiologically, for low-grade maltoma, okay, they arise in response to H. pylori infection with inflammation, while those for high-grade arises due to gene mutation. Okay, so their manifestations are non-specific. Bleeding is the more common complication rather than perforation. Diagnosis is to rule out extragastric disease because you may be dealing with a systemic lymphomatous condition. Okay, and then the combination of endoscopy, CT scan, no, for staging, and also bone marrow biopsy to rule out an M1 disease. For low-grade lymphoma, okay, take note, no, it's already being highlighted. This is a non-surgical lesion, and the first line of treatment is simply eradication of H. pylori. While for high-grade lymphoma, okay, for most cases, a combination of chemotherapy and radiation is recommended, and surgery is reserved for urgent situations or for tumor-related complications like hemorrhage, okay, perforation, or obstruction. Okay, so lymphoma per se, no? Once you know you're dealing with lymphoma pre-operatively and there are no tumor-related complications, the management is non-surgical. Okay, and there are many regimens for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. They usually cite, no, the combination of R-CHOP, no, as a good regimen to begin as a mainstay for gastric lymphoma. Next is GIST. No, they arise from the interstitial cells of Cajal, okay, the pacemaker of the stomach, and being sarcomatous, the prognostic factors depend on tumor size and mitotic count. And just like other sarcomas, they metastasize hematogenously and not via the lymphatics. So how do we recognize GIST? There is a tumor marker for that, no? c-KIT or your CD117. You can also have platelet-derived growth factor receptor A and CD34. No? Majority of GIST occurs in the stomach and epithelial cell stroma as its most common subtype. Okay? Sarcoma arise not from the epithelium, so their location is expectedly submucosal. Okay, they are usually asymptomatic, but if they do present, okay, usually there is bleeding, early satiety because of the compression, okay, especially for large GIST. There may be abdominal pain or fullness. So diagnosis, combination of endoscopy with biopsy, and then imaging for staging. And treatment for small GIST, simple wedge resection will suffice with negative margins. For large GIST, no, sometimes it warrants a total gastrectomy, okay, but we don't perform lymphadenectomy together with the gastric resection, because of that reason, no, of the not involving the nodes. There are drugs, okay, that can be used to block, no, c-KIT or CD117, no, like imatinib and sunitinib, okay, reserved for unresectable metastatic cases. Okay, let's go to carcinoids. There are three types, no? Type 1, okay, occurs in type A chronic atrophic gastritis. This is the most common variant. Okay, patients have hypergastrinemia. In type 2, you have Zollinger-Ellison syndrome coexisting. Type 3, the sporadic form, is the one not associated with hypergastrinemia and unfortunately has the worst prognosis. Now, gastric carcinoids are actually rare. Okay? They are a rare location for carcinoids. In the GI tract, it is the appendix that is the most common location for carcinoids. Okay? So the manifestation is caused by hormonal excess, local tumor growth, or metastasis. Okay? They may be found incidentally during the surgery. Okay, only 10%, no, only a few will manifest with the full-blown carcinoid syndrome, and there is a requirement for that. No, it only happens in patients with liver metastasis. Okay, so no liver metastasis, no carcinoid syndrome, and the carcinoid syndrome is composed of the following manifestations. Okay, explained by the different biochemical product of the tumor, no, secretory diarrhea, flushing, down to pellagra, okay, cramping, edema, bronchoconstriction. Okay, so biopsy, combination of, or diagnosis, combination of endoscopy and biopsy, endoscopic ultrasound for staging, as well as your imaging, like your localizing somatostatin analog in like indium octreotide scan, okay, and then measurement of plasma chromogranin A and neuron-specific enolase as tumor markers, as well as measuring its catabolite, no? 5-hydroxyindole acetic acid, no, in the 24-hour urine sample. Okay, so management for carcinoid syndrome, debulking is warranted just like in gastrinoma, no, to ameliorate the excessive manifestations due to the excess chemicals being produced. There are a lot of drugs to choose from, no, anti-H1, anti-H2, okay, we have methoxamine, cyproheptadine, diphenoxylate sodium with atropine. And then take note, no, that for the different subtypes, no, type 1 polypectomy, antrectomy for recurrence. For type 2 gastrinoma, okay, treatment of the gastrinoma, somatostatin analogs, okay, then possible local excision or antrectomy, and then for type 3 and block resection with regional nodes, and then possible chemotherapy or radiation. Now, the end goal here again is to perform an R0, especially for the non-metastatic ones. For metastatic lesions, debulking is mainstay. A 36-year-old presents with weight loss in a large palpable tumor in the upper abdomen. Endoscopy reveals an intact mucosa without signs of carcinoma. Multiple biopsies show normal mucosa. Upper GI studies show a mass in the stomach. And at surgery, a 3 kilogram mass is removed. It is necessary to remove the left side of the transverse colon. What is the most likely diagnosis? So the mention of a normal mucosa here should make you suspect of a sarcomatous lesion, because sarcomas doesn't originate from the epithelium. And the answer must be B, gastrointestinal stromal tumor. A 63-year-old is admitted to the hospital with upper GI bleed that subsides spontaneously within a short time after admission. Barium studies show gastric ulceration described as having a donut sign. What is the most likely diagnosis? Again, the GIST. No? The donut sign is due to the umbilication or puckering, okay, of the mucosa towards the lesion located at the submucosa. Miscellaneous lesions like Menetrier's disease. Okay, this is associated with, take note, no, this is a favorite question in the boards. Protein-losing enteropathy and hypochlorhydria. Okay, large rugal folds sparing the antrum, and it is associated with an increased risk of cancer. Okay, biopsy, diffuse hyperplasia of surface mucus secreting cells. No, there is an abundance of mucus secreting cells, and that explains the protein-losing enteropathy. They replace the parietal cells. Okay, so there is decreased parietal cells, explaining now the hypochlorhydria. Okay, you usually have a middle-aged man with epigastric pain, weight loss, diarrhea, and hypoproteinemia. Treatment is a combination of cetuximab, an EGFR blocker, okay, and total gastrectomy for those with tumor-related complications. Okay, that is for Menetrier's disease. Another is a watermelon stomach or gastric antral vascular ectasia or GAVE, okay, referring to a dilated mucosal blood vessel in the distal stomach. No? Antrum is distal. Okay, the appearance is that of a parallel red stripes atop the mucosa mimicking a watermelon, hence the name. Okay, so in contrast to portal gastropathy, which affects the proximal stomach, no, because the left gastric vein or the coronary vein drains the proximal stomach, not the distal portion. Okay, so treatment, control of the bleeding, no, via endoscopic means, no, NDIAG or your argon beam coagulator, and for persistent bleeding, antrectomy. Another potential cause of upper GI bleeding is Dulafoy's lesion. No? You have here a large tortuous, take note, submucosal artery. So you have a patient, usually male, with upper GI bleeding that is usually intermittent. On endoscopy, one sees pulsating blood from a normal appearing gastric mucosa. And then treatment may range from simple or endoscopic means of hemostasis, angiographic embolization, and lastly surgery by oversewing or even resection of that segment. A 54-year-old man presents with a massive upper GI bleed. After resuscitation, endoscopy is performed. No varices, gastritis, ulcers are seen. After copious irrigation, a pinpoint lesion is seen near the GE junction. What can be said about this lesion? Bleeding is from a submucosal vessel. This is a typical case of a Dulafoy's lesion. So an alert nursing home patient is unable to swallow because of a neurologic disease and has lost a significant amount of weight. What treatment should be offered? Now, this question can be answered by our discussion in surgical metabolism. No? If you remember, we discussed there the Aspen algorithm. Okay, if the GI tract can be utilized, then the GI tract must be used. Okay, if the likelihood of usage is prolonged, okay, dapat may tube insertion, no? So we don't answer here central hyperalimentation or giving of intralipids, lalo namang hindi tayo magda-divert ng saliva, no, with cervical esophagostomy. So we only have to choose between PEG and nasogastric feeding. Okay, since ito ay merong neurologic disease, okay, the likelihood of usage will be prolonged, no? So the best answer will be letter C. Insert a percutaneous endoscopic gastrostomy. And then we have a pediatric condition, no, that may affect the stomach. Okay, so partly na-discuss natin kanina yan, no, yung hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. So characteristics, okay, the child will manifest with regurgitation of feedings, projectile non-bilous emesis, there will be visible peristaltic gastric waves, okay, and the palpable olive-shaped mass in the right upper epigastrium, okay, resulting to a hypokalemic hypochloremic metabolic alkalosis. Okay, so again, no, ang timing ng surgery dito ay never emergent nor urgent, no? Kailangan muna kasing ma-correct yung acid-base disturbance. Okay, how do we diagnose? Aside from the history and PE, okay, required ang abdominal ultrasound. Okay, nakikita kasi sa ultrasound yung hypertrophic pyloric sphincter area. Okay, so management is to correct the electrolyte and acid-base disturbance prior to proceeding with what we call as a Preday-Ramsted pyloromyotomy. Okay, in a Preday-Ramsted pyloromyotomy, the thickened sphincter in the pylorus is incised, okay, of course with utmost care not to perforate the pylorus. So ini-incise lang yung region ng tunica serosa and then muscularis, dapat maiwan yung submucosa at saka mucosa na intact. Okay, so after doing that, okay, luluwag, no, yung pyloric channel. Okay, so myotomy, okay, cutting through the pyloric sphincter will relieve the obstruction, no, seen in pyloric stenosis.